Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to get over seeing the British press bully a black autistic man to death. This is probably one of the most harrowing things I feel like I've witnessed. And it hurts even more because if you are someone in the public eye, or you're someone who has been vocal, done any sort of activism, for me personally, I think a lot about like my student days and how sometimes that would basically leave you exposed to being hounded by the press, and how terrifying it is to feel unsafe, to feel worried, to feel like your life is over. It's a feeling I never want to experience ever again. It's a feeling that I remember explicitly saying at the time, I feel like they're not going to stop till I'm dead. And how much that transforms you. Seeing this unfold, honestly, has been so hard. When I first saw that story, I thought, oh, that's weird. And I kind of went on with my life. The level of vitriol he received, even just the level of coverage it received, was completely unwarranted. This was not a public interest story. Nobody anywhere truly cared. If anything, this was to do with Cambridge as an institution. It was down to them to worry about, to seek out any sort of information they needed, dish out any sort of punishment that was warranted. It was nothing to do with the entire country, even the world, weighing in on one man's story. It's really interesting to see that people are now backtracking on things that they said, deleting articles that have been posted. You know, even the Times are running ads about the story. This was a witch hunt. This was targeted abuse. And it was really, really, really disgusting to see. And now someone has died because of it. There's a huge racism problem in British media. I say this as someone who is a journalist, someone who writes stories, someone who is very much in that world. I've always been aware of the racism that exists. And this is one of the more particularly nasty manifestations of it. And I honestly don't even really know what to say. This did not have to happen at all. But I think it kind of serves as a reminder that as Black British people, there is a different rule for us. And we will truly never be safe. We will truly never be heard. And I think it is just like, oh, okay, in all of the times I think, oh, we've made so much progress, so much has changed. Something like this happens and you realize we are exactly where we started. And I send my condolences to his family, to his peers, to his colleagues, to everyone that ever loved him and knew him. And it's just devastating that this had to happen to Jason Arday. I mean, it didn't even have to happen.
And now he's dead. He's dead. He's just been found dead. This hit me like a truck when I saw this news pop up on my phone. He's dead now. It hit me for a number of reasons. One, there was an element of guilt because I haven't spoken about this. I've shared other people's stuff, but haven't directly spoken about it because I didn't know the facts. Because by definition, the first inquiry that Cambridge did cleared him of plagiarism, and the second one's still ongoing. So don't know the facts. And I like to know the facts before I speak. But the one thing that I knew was true was the disproportionate level of backlash that he received, that Jason Arday received in the press over the accusations of plagiarism as a professor at Cambridge. So I knew that that was wrong. Similarly to like how the Meghan Markle stuff was wrong. You know, like how the Daily Mail and the Express would publish the exact same stories about Princess Kate, having avocados as like a pregnancy treat, and they'd praise it when Princess Kate did it, But when Kate Middleton did it, and then when Meghan Markle did it, they'd be like, "Oh, the avocados are linked to drought and murder." It's just that disproportionate level of hate that black prominent people get compared to their white counterparts. And ironically, I'm going to plagiarize here and use Jupiter Ball, is how you know him, my friend Helio. He made a video, which I actually accepted the collab on barely half an hour ago, where he named all of the white professors, a bunch of them, and academics who still are gainfully employed in academia, who've all been found to have committed plagiarism, and yet you don't know their names.
William O'Reilly, Anna Laura Wainwright, David Latchman, Ross Holmes, Fiona Leal, Nicola Morrison, Neil Wynne.
So while I don't know the nature of how he died, the likelihood that his death is unrelated to the fact his recent resignation is very, very low. And if it is in any way linked, racism killed Jason Arday. And that's why a lot of black people who are in some way prominent are feeling they are coming for all of us, because they don't want black people to have influence in this country. To his family, to his loved ones.
Jason Arday was lynched. He was lynched by the racist British media. He was lynched by the podcasters. This is exactly, take what happened to Jason Arday for the past week and multiply it by 10 years. And that's what they were trying to do to Duchess Meghan. And tell me that you still hate Harry for removing his wife from that situation. God bless you, Jason Arday. Whatever you did or you didn't do, your life was not worth the price. And I think we as the British people need to start shaming the British press. They've done this to Meghan, they've done this to another black person. How many more people need to die? Caroline Flack? How many more need to die?
6 days ago, just 6 days ago, Amanda Platler, whatever her name is, of the Daily Mail, wrote this article and was printed in Daily Mail. Are you guys seeing how these things are linked? How the British media operates? I posted a video just now talking about the correlation, and guess what TikTok did? TikTok removed the video and said, I will spread the misinformation. What's the misinformation in this? This is what Daily Mail printed and posted. Amanda Platler, or Platlet, or whatever, wrote it. What's the misinformation in that? The British press are not innocent in anything. They know exactly what they're doing, regardless. Some derangers are saying, oh no, there's no link, blah, blah. But it's clear as day. Everyone's saying, thank God Meghan and Harry left. Thank God they left. Thank God Harry took Meghan away. Because who knows? Because, I mean, Meghan even said how she felt about the attack, the pylon on her. Until this day, they left in 2020. Until this day, they still constantly write articles after articles about Meghan. If they're not going to make up lies of what's happening now, they will make up lies of what happened in the past and just drag up issues from the past. They're doing it. It's just so sad that they keep getting away with it. They keep doing it and getting away with it. Now they're deleting articles they wrote, and now it's come out that poor man was cleared of plagiarism.
Now, squaddies, I want to slow things down for a moment, because this isn't just another headline. This is a human being. Professor Jason Arday was 41 years old, a father, a partner, a son, a brother, a man with people who loved him, and today his family is grieving. His death has also sparked serious questions about the relentless public scrutiny he faced in the days and weeks before he died. His family has described him as a victim of misinformation and harassment. So before anybody turns this into another political football, let's remember something incredibly basic. A human being was at the center of this story. Not a headline, not a trending topic, not a juicy controversy. A person. And this is where I have a real problem with the way sections of the British media operate. Because there is a difference between holding somebody accountable and turning their entire existence into a public spectacle. If somebody has questions to answer, investigate. If somebody has made mistakes, report them. If something is genuinely in the public interest, by all means scrutinize it. But once the story becomes, let's find absolutely everything we can about this person, then another commentator piles on, then another article, then another television discussion, then social media gets involved, then everybody is arguing about the argument about the original argument. Where does it stop? At some point you've got to ask, are we informing the public anymore, or are we simply feeding the machine? Because outrage gets clicks, controversy gets attention, and unfortunately, human misery can become incredibly profitable. That's the part that should make all of us uncomfortable. And squaddies, this is why I think about Diana, because we've seen what happens when the public's appetite for a famous person's life becomes completely out of control. Princess Diana wasn't just a princess. She was a mother, she was a daughter, she was a sister. She was a human being trying to live her life while an enormous media machine followed her everywhere. Her death in Paris became the ultimate warning about the dangers surrounding obsessive pursuit by paparazzi, and the wider media culture around her remains one of the darkest chapters in modern British celebrity journalism. So when Harry talks about the press, people shouldn't automatically roll their eyes and say, "Oh, here he goes again." Maybe listen, because Harry isn't speaking about this from a textbook. He lived it. He watched what happened to his mother. He knows what it feels like when a human being becomes a permanent public spectacle. And then he watched Meghan walk into a similar environment. The headlines, the photographs, the endless commentary, the constant speculation, the obsession with what she wore, what she said, what she didn't say, where she went, who she spoke to. Even her jewelry became a national debate. At some point, squaddies, you have to ask, how much is enough? Because Meghan doesn't have to be perfect for us to recognize that relentless targeting can be harmful. She's a human being. Leave some room for humanity. And that's what makes the treatment of Meghan so disturbing. She can do something good and the story becomes negative. She can stay quiet and the story becomes negative. She can succeed and people look for a reason to undermine it. She can make a mistake and suddenly it's treated like evidence of some terrible character flaw. It's like the conclusion has already been written. Now they just need Meghan to provide the next headline. And that is not healthy journalism. That's an obsession. And here's where I want regular people to think about this differently. I don't think we should wait for another tragedy before we start asking these questions. We shouldn't suddenly discover compassion after somebody is gone. We should have compassion while they're still here. We shouldn't need a funeral before we start asking whether the headlines went too far. We shouldn't need a family to break down before we ask whether the coverage became cruel. And we absolutely shouldn't treat someone's suffering as entertainment. Because behind every headline is somebody's mother, somebody's father, somebody's husband, somebody's wife, somebody's child, somebody's loved one. So rest in peace, Professor Jason Arday. May his family be given privacy, dignity, and space to grieve. And may his death force all of us to ask a very uncomfortable question. When did we become so comfortable consuming another human being's pain as entertainment? Because Meghan doesn't need to be perfect. Harry doesn't need to be perfect. Jason Arday didn't need to be perfect. Nobody does. Accountability matters. Truth matters. But so does human dignity. And if our media culture forgets that, then we have a much bigger problem than the next headline.
Now, squaddies, let's be real for a minute. Nobody is saying Meghan should be above criticism. If there's a genuine story, report it. If there are questions that deserve answers, ask them. That's journalism. But there is a massive difference between reporting on somebody and turning that person's entire life into a never-ending content factory. Because with Meghan, sometimes it feels like absolutely everything becomes material. Her clothes, her jewelry, her marriage, her children, her work, her friendships, where she goes, where she doesn't go, what she says, what she doesn't say. Squaddies, at some point you have to step back and say, hold on, are we actually reporting anymore, or are we just looking for another reason to talk about this woman? Because imagine living like that. You wake up, you make breakfast, you put on an outfit, you post something online, and somewhere somebody is already writing a headline about what your breakfast, outfit, or Instagram post supposedly really means. Give the woman a break. And that's what regular people need to understand. Criticism is normal. Every public figure gets criticized. But when somebody's every move is picked apart, mocked, twisted, and turned into another negative story, that's something different. That's when the person can stop being treated like a human being and start being treated like a character in somebody else's never-ending drama. And I think that's exactly where the line gets blurry. Because once a person becomes content, the temptation is to keep producing more content. One story leads to another. One photograph becomes a debate. The debate becomes another article. Then somebody comments on that article. Then another commentator discusses the commentator. And suddenly we're 5 layers deep into a story that started with Meghan simply existing. Seriously, at what point do we just say enough already? And here's the part I really want to stress. You don't have to be a Meghan fan to understand this. You don't even have to agree with her. This is about basic human decency. You can dislike somebody and still recognize that they're a person. You can criticize somebody without humiliating them. You can report a story without turning someone's family life into public entertainment. Those things can exist together. And when they don't, that's when journalism starts becoming something much uglier. Because there's a difference between here's something the public needs to know and here's another thing we can use to keep Meghan in the headlines. Those are not the same thing. And squaddies, this is why I keep coming back to the human being behind the headline. Meghan isn't a headline. She's a woman. She's a wife. She's a mother. She's somebody's daughter. She's somebody's friend. She has feelings. She has good days. She has bad days. She makes mistakes. She celebrates things. She gets tired. She laughs. She cries, just like everybody else. The difference is that most of us can make a mistake without having 20 commentators dissecting it before lunchtime. Imagine making one awkward decision at work and seeing employees' shocking choice, experts react. You'd be like, please leave me alone. But that's basically the environment public figures can live in. And this is where Harry's concerns become understandable. Harry has seen what relentless media attention can do. He knows what happened to his mother. So when he looks at the treatment Meghan has received and says, I don't want my family living like this, I don't think that's some outrageous demand. I think it's a very human reaction. Because sometimes protecting your family means recognizing a situation isn't healthy and saying, we're stepping away. And that's the bigger conversation. Not, do you like Meghan? Not, do you agree with Harry? The question is, how much scrutiny is too much? Because if the answer is, there is no limit, then we've got a serious problem. And squaddies, I don't believe anybody should have to reach breaking point before we remember they're human. We shouldn't need a tragedy to suddenly start talking about compassion. We shouldn't wait until somebody is gone before we ask whether the coverage went too far. Human beings deserve dignity while they're still here. That's the line. Criticism? Fine. Accountability? Absolutely. But turning someone's entire existence into an endless stream of negative content? That's where I say enough is enough. But she should never have to surrender her humanity just because people decided her life makes good content. She's a person first. And honestly, squaddies, maybe the media needs to remember that.
Now, squaddies, this is where Harry deserves a little more understanding, because people love to say Harry is too sensitive about the press. Too sensitive? Seriously? This is a man who grew up watching his mother deal with relentless media attention. He knows what happens when someone's private life becomes a public obsession. So when Meghan started facing intense scrutiny, headlines, photographers, commentary, and constant speculation, why would Harry just sit there and say, well, I suppose that's the price of being famous? No, he's seen that movie already. He knows how ugly it can get. And this is where I think people completely miss Harry's point. He wasn't saying, nobody is allowed to criticize my wife. That's not realistic. He was saying, there has to be a limit. And honestly, squaddies, isn't that something most ordinary husbands would understand? Imagine your wife is being hammered from every direction. Every outfit gets picked apart. Every photograph becomes a discussion. Every mistake gets magnified. Strangers are commenting on your marriage. People are dragging your family into stories. And you're supposed to sit there drinking your tea like, oh well, that's show business. Come on. If that were happening to most of us, we'd be on the phone saying, leave my wife alone. And that's what makes Harry's decision understandable. He wasn't running away from responsibility. He was taking responsibility. He had a wife to protect. He had children to protect. And he had personal experience telling him that relentless media attention isn't something you simply shrug off. That's a very different argument. And here's where I think Harry deserves credit. He could have said, this is just how royal life works. Meghan has to put up with it. But he didn't. He basically said, no, my family matters more. And squaddies, let's make this simple. If your employer puts you in an environment that's destroying your family life, you don't have to stay there just because somebody else thinks you should. If a friendship becomes toxic, you can walk away. If a workplace becomes unbearable, you can leave. So why should Harry be expected to remain in an environment he believed was damaging to his wife and family simply because it was connected to the royal family? Because it's royal? That's not enough. Family comes first. And I think that's one of the biggest things the critics miss. Harry wasn't choosing between duty and laziness. He was facing a choice between continuing with a system he believed was harming his family and creating distance from it. And he chose his family. That's a pretty human decision. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'm your host, Miles. Love you all and goodbye.